The girl was already bleeding when Caleb Holt saw her, and the summer sun kept baking the red into her skin. She sat on the porch boards outside a lonely cabin near Dodge City, Kansas, with her dress torn at the shoulder and her hair stuck to her face with sweat. Caleb reined in hard, his boots hit the ground fast, and every bad thought in a man's head could have been blamed on how he moved. From a distance, it looked like a rancher had finally found a woman too weak to run and too afraid to scream. Lila Mae Barlow tried to stand, failed, and slid back against the wall. With a small sound that wasn't quite a sob, Caleb took one step closer, and her body flinched like it remembered hands. He looked at her wrists, and he saw faint marks that didn't belong to farm work and didn't belong to an accident. He reached up to his saddle, pulled down his canteen, and set it on the dirt with care. Then he nudged it forward with the toe of his boot and stepped back so far that even the wind could fit between them. His voice came out low and steady, and it sounded like a man talking to a wild horse. "It's water. You take it if you want. Don't touch me. I'll die." She drew a sharp breath and added the part that made Caleb's blood go cold. "He'll kill me for it." The noise inside stopped, and heavy footsteps started toward the door. Caleb stayed where he was because one wrong move could turn mercy into a death sentence. If he couldn't touch her, and he couldn't leave her, what could a decent man do next? Without getting her killed anyway, the cabin door swung open, and Wade Barlow filled the frame like bad weather. He was thick in the shoulders, red in the face, and unsteady on his feet, with a raw kind of confidence that only whiskey can teach. His eyes landed on Caleb first, then snapped to the canteen, then cut back to Lila, like he was counting sins. Lila didn't reach for the water. She just sat there, frozen, because she knew what would come next. Caleb stayed planted in the dirt, hands out and easy, because moving fast would only light the match. Wade shouted that Caleb was trespassing, and Wade shouted that Caleb was after another man's wife. Caleb didn't bother arguing long, because men like Wade don't listen for truth. He spoke one calm line and kept his voice low. "I stopped for water, that's all." Wade stepped down off the porch, closed the distance, and tried to shove Caleb back like he owned the ground. Caleb took the shove, slid one boot in the dust, and didn't fall. He caught Wade's wrist, turned it just enough, and made the strap drop without breaking anything. Wade swung anyway, wild and sloppy, and Caleb blocked with his forearm because he couldn't let it reach Lila. That was when another set of hooves came in, steady and unhurried. Silas Merrick rode up, with two hired hands behind him, and he looked clean enough to belong in a bank. Silas tipped his hat at Wade, called him cousin, then let his eyes settle on Caleb with a slow grin. "Caleb Holt, you always did have a talent for showing up where you shouldn't." Wade puffed up at that, like he'd been handed a script. Lila's face went pale, because she knew this wasn't just her husband anymore. Caleb glanced at the canteen, then at Lila's wrists, and he finally understood the trap. If he stayed, he'd be the villain. If he left, she might not live to see morning, and Silas Merrick was already turning this into a story that the whole county would believe. So why did Silas look so certain, like he'd been waiting for Caleb to take the bait? Caleb didn't give Silas the fight he wanted. He tipped his hat, backed off slow, and climbed into the saddle like he was leaving a neighbor's yard, not a fire about to spread. Wade kept talking loud, because loud was the only way he ever sounded right. Silas stayed quiet, and that quiet followed Caleb all the way down the trail. Lila never touched the canteen. Caleb saw her eyes flick to it once, then flick to the doorway again, like she was measuring how much pain a sip of water would cost her. That look sat heavy in Caleb's chest. He'd seen storms, drought, and stampedes, but he'd learned a long time ago that fear inside a house could be worse than anything outside it. By late afternoon, he was riding into Dodge City, Kansas, with dust on his hat brim and questions stacked higher than his saddle. He went straight to a deputy he trusted, Frank Mallory, a steady man with a sun-baked face and a slow blink that meant he listened before he spoke. Frank took one look at Caleb's arm, saw the welt, and gave a tired half smile like he'd already guessed the rest. Caleb set a small scrap of paper on Frank's desk. It was the thing he'd found on the trail earlier, a torn shipping note with numbers and a ranch mark scribbled in a hurry. Caleb had planned to hand it back to whoever lost it. Now he wanted to know what it was worth. Frank studied it, then leaned back in his chair. He didn't sound excited, which is how you know a man has seen trouble before. That mark shows up when cattle get walked to Abilene under the wrong name, Frank said. He tapped the paper once. Folks with money do it quiet. Folks without money do it sloppy. Wade's sloppy. Caleb's jaw tightened. So it wasn't just a drunk husband. It was a pipeline. Frank lowered his voice. Silas Merrick's got cousins everywhere, and friends where it counts. You barge into that cabin again, you'll be the story, not the truth. Caleb asked why Silas hated him so much, and Frank gave him a look that said, some history never cools off. Silas's wife, Eleanor, she used to carry a torch for you. Silas never forgave it. Frank didn't stop there. He hated you before Eleanor ever said your name. Frank said, back in the day you beat him on a landline dispute, and you beat him again on a cattle deal. Men like Silas don't forget losing. They just find a prettier reason to call it hate. Frank's eyes narrowed. And there's another thing. If Silas thinks you might connect him to rustling, he'll try to bury you first. Caleb felt that old ache, then pushed it aside, because Lila's bruises were newer than any old romance. Subscribe if you want the next turn of this story. Pour some tea. Tell me what time it is and where you're listening from, because Caleb's next choice could save Lila or finish her. Caleb rode out of Dodge City before the heat broke, with Frank Mallory's warning still ringing in his ears. He did not ride angry. He rode careful. Because a careful man can live long enough to fix something. He did not go straight to the Barlow cabin. He circled wide through the grass and fence lines, and he left his horse in a low spot where it would not shine like a signpost. When he walked in, he stopped at the fence, not the porch. He kept distance, just like before, because Lila had made one thing plain. A decent gesture could still get her killed. Lila came out like a shadow, slow and quiet, scanning the yard first, then the tree line. Her face looked worse in daylight. And that hurt Caleb more than the welt on his arm. He spoke low, more to steady her than to fill the silence. I'm not here to touch you. I'm here to listen. She nodded once, like that was the only kind of help she could afford. She crouched by a loose board near the steps, her hands shaking so hard she had to try twice. She looked over her shoulder at the cabin door, like she expected it to open any second. I've kept this 2 months, she whispered. I didn't dare give it to anyone. If you didn't come back, I didn't know what I was going to do. She did not hand it to him. She set it on the dirt, then stepped back. Inside was a brass button stamped with a clear ranch mark, the kind of mark a big outfit would put on a man's coat so nobody forgot who owned the room. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. Silas Merrick had been here. Close enough to drop part of himself in the dust, and Wade had still slept easy. That told Caleb everything about who Wade was really afraid of. Lila swallowed hard and kept her eyes on the cabin door. He comes here, she whispered. Wade changes when he comes. That was all she said, because more words were dangerous. A hawk cried somewhere overhead, and then Caleb heard it. The soft thud of hooves, not one rider, but several. One of Silas's hired hands cracked a rifle out in the open, not aimed to kill, just a warning shot that kicked dust near the fence. Lila flinched and backed toward the shadows. Caleb didn't think twice. He palmed the bundle, turned his body to shield it, and moved fast for the low ground. Silas had eyes on this place, and Caleb had walked back in anyway because Lila was running out of time. He was not running from a fight, he was running toward a plan, because if Silas caught him with that button, in open country, Silas would not bother with lies anymore, and the next few minutes would decide whether Caleb got proof to town, or whether Lila got buried where nobody would ask why. Caleb didn't stop moving until the grass dipped and the road opened toward Dodge City. Behind him, the hoofbeats faded, not because the danger was gone, but because Silas Merrick liked winning slow. Caleb kept the bundle tight. And he kept seeing Lila on that porch, staring at a canteen like it was a loaded gun. He knew one hard truth now. If he stormed back in like a hero, Wade would take it out on her the second the door closed. So Caleb did the unthinkable for a man built on pride. He chose patience over punch first, and he chose proof over bragging. Deputy Frank Mallory was waiting near town, and one look at the button told him this could finally stand up in daylight. Frank didn't rush to slap irons on anybody. He knew Silas Merrick could buy time, buy tongues, and buy trouble, so Frank did the smart thing. He sent a runner to bring in a few older cattlemen, the kind of men who'd lost stock on the trail and kept quiet because nobody ever proved a thing. They gathered in a back room, plain chairs, sweat on collars, dust on boots. Caleb laid the button on the table, then laid the torn shipping note beside it. Frank matched the marks slow, like he was reading scripture. The room went still. Those men didn't need a sermon. They knew what rustling did to a town. It didn't just steal cattle, it stole winter. Silas walked in wearing that clean smile, acting like he owned the air. He tried a joke first. Then he tried a softer voice and a private offer to Frank. Frank didn't even blink. One of the old cattlemen leaned forward and said it flat. "Enough, Merrick. We're done bleeding for your pocket." Silas's smile tightened, and for the first time he looked outnumbered. Wade showed up a minute later, loud and hot, already half drunk. When Frank asked about Lila, Wade answered like she was property, not a person. That was the moment the room turned all the way. Wade took a step toward Frank like he might swing, and Frank's hand went to his gun, not eager, just ready. Two cattlemen stood up at the same time, and Wade realized he wasn't in his own yard anymore. Fought anyway, more pride than sense, and Frank finally put him in irons when Wade wouldn't back down. Silas tried to slip out in the confusion, like a man leaving a church before the collection plate. Caleb saw it. He stepped into the doorway, not with a gun, just with his body, and he looked Silas in the eye. Silas hesitated, and that hesitation cost him. Frank's voice cut through the room. "Sit down, Merrick. You're not walking away from this." Silas sat, because for once, money couldn't buy a door. By the next morning, Lila was somewhere safe in town, with a door that locked from the inside and a cup of water she could drink without paying for it later. Caleb never claimed he saved her alone. He showed up, set the water down, and refused to be used as an excuse to hurt her. That kind of restraint isn't loud, but it's what keeps people alive. This story is collected and rewritten, with a few details added for clearer lessons and stronger storytelling. The visuals are AI generated to support the mood and emotions of the narrative. If it's not your thing, rest up, take care of your health, and come back when you feel like it. If it stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment so I know what to bring you next. And here's the question that matters most. If you were Caleb, would you risk your reputation to save a stranger, or would you walk away and call it none of your business?